Good evening and welcome to the Standards Committee for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council on the 8th of July 2025. Louise, will you read out any housekeeping notices?
Yes, certainly. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning down the volume on your laptops completely. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome to members. Are there any members online? No. So Democratic Services. Yeah, thank you. Are there any apologies for this meeting?
Yes, Chair. Apologies have been received from Ian Sibley, Councillor Eleanor Connolly and Councillor Sarah Armstrong.
Thank you. And any substitutes?
And they're being substituted by Councillor Patrick Canavan is substituting for Councillor Connolly and Councillor Rigby is substituting for Councillor Armstrong this evening.
Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 3, the election of chair. I'm seeking nominations for the election of chair.
Chair, could I nominate Councillor Vanessa Ricketts, please?
Thank you. Any other nominations? Do we have a seconder for that nomination?
Everybody.
I'm happy to second that, please.
Lovely, thank you. If there's no other nominations, then I declare you chair. In which case I shall ask you to take over.
I'll just get my life sorted. Thank you very much. I'm honoured to accept the position of Chair of Standards for the 3rd consecutive year. I remain deeply committed to upholding the principles of integrity, fairness and accountability that underpins the important work of this committee. Recent comments from a previous member of this committee suggesting that the committee is making political decisions is both disappointing and unfounded. I want to reaffirm that the Standards Committee operates independently and is entirely non-political in nature. Our focus remains firmly on upholding the high ethical standards and ensuring that our work is guided solely by principles, not politics. All our deliberations are also overseen by our eminent independent persons who hold us to account and ensure our impartiality. Many complaints received never come to our committee, as they are evaluated by the monitoring officer and dismissed as not meeting the criteria. The previous member is well aware that this was the case with complaints made against the Vice Chairman. When we sit on standards, we leave politics at the door, and it is very disappointing that the previous member was unable to do that. I'm grateful for the continued trust and support of my colleagues, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Councillor Wright to the committee, and I look forward to working collaboratively to maintain the confidence of those we serve. Thank you for this opportunity. We now move on to agenda item 4, which is the election of the Vice Chair. I am seeking nominations for the election of the Vice Chair.
Could I nominate Councillor Adrian Chapman, please?
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Thank you. Is there a seconder for Councillor Chapman Law? Thank you, Councillor Patterson-West. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Wright? Thank you. Councillor Rigby. In that case, we will go to a written vote on this. So if we could circulate the papers for that, please. Lovely, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for that. The majority vote is for Councillor Chapman-Law to remain in his third term as Vice Chairman, so congratulations. We now move on to agenda item number 5, which is the declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to declare at this time? No? Excellent. So we move to agenda item number 6 for the minutes of the last meeting. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those minutes, please? Thank you. I'm seeing Councillor Chapman-Law proposing and Councillor Patterson-West seconding. And can we carry a vote on that, please? All those in favour? Please indicate. Yep. Lovely. Yep, that's carried. Thank you. Agenda item number 7 is, I will sign these minutes now, but agenda item number 7 is public issues. Are there any public issues, please?
Yes, Chair, we've received 2 public statements from Mr McKinstry, who I understand is here to read them out.
Thank you. Mr McKinstry, please can I ask you to come to the table? Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me okay, Chair? Congratulations both, by the way. 2 statements. First, item 9, Code of Conduct Complaints Review. When discussing the following complaints tonight, BCP 199, 203, 205, 207 and 209, it'll be interesting to hear how long the subject councillors were given to comply with the related sanctions. I see that the notification letters went out on the 4th of June 2025, which was 34 days ago. The committee may also wish to note that complaint BCP 209 was upheld in full and not partially, as stated on page 29 of tonight's paperwork. Item 10, review of the Code of Conduct Complaints Procedure. Regarding the naming of councillors, I can see nothing in the Constitution that prevents this currently, although clarification is overdue because the approach has been inconsistent until now. At this committee on the 12th of January 2021, for instance, the councillor in complaint BCP 027 was named, even though he'd been completely exonerated. Likewise, in the well-known Cleaning for Votes complaint, BCP 132, the subject councillor was named, but not his collaborating colleagues. Where misconduct is proved, naming councillors may have punitive and deterrent effects and would certainly enlighten the voting public, but only if the council's website settings are adjusted. At present, search engines aren't picking up council agenda papers, minutes, registers of interest, or other key documents, and the same would doubtless apply to this committee's decision records. I hope this problem can be rectified, as it must be causing inconvenience right across the authority.
Thank you, Mr McKinstry. We now move on to agenda item number 8, which is the annual report on Code of Conduct complaints. And this report provides a summary of the complaints received and determined which were made against councillors for alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct. We have a duty as a Standards Committee to consider an annual report and to promote and maintain high standards of conduct. I'd now like to ask the monitoring officer to introduce the report.
Actually, forgive
Or
me,
the
Chair,
Deputy
it's
Monitoring
actually the
Officer.
Deputy Monitoring Officer on this occasion.
Thank you, Chair. Again, briefly, introduction to the report. So as you said, this is the annual report, comes before the committee each year. This one covers the period from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2025. Previous year stats are available in previous year's annual reports. In 24-25, there were 28 complaints against BCP councillors, 6 against parish and town councillors. Although I think it's worth noting, when you look back, there seems to be a cyclical pattern to the complaints rising and falling with the term of office and election periods. The main source of complaints were from the public, with social media being cited as the highest source for complaints in the last year. Again, that's actually a reversal of a pattern. So we saw emails being the higher one last year, and that switched back to social media. There's a table at paragraph 19 that details the complaints categories. Now, this is slightly modified from previous years. We've introduced a new online complaint submission process, which now allows complainants to attach and upload supporting evidence. And we've also improved our logging and management system for monitoring complaints that improves our statistics. So table 19 has been extended slightly. You'll see the new categories are indented on that table. So we've still got all the information. You can still see the history, but it's a slightly change in the layout. The majority of complaints were dismissed through the 24-25 period. Some were resolved informally and some were referred for independent investigation. The recommendations are set out in the report, that you note the report, review the report and consider any further actions. There is a suggestion at paragraph 25, the committee may wish to consider referring the report to council for information. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting to see that social media is still very much our bête noire of this committee. We try to carry out as much social media training, but you can't make a horse drink. You can only lead it to the water. I'm also very disappointed that we have 3 members who have failed to comply with the determination of this committee, with the sanctions that were provided. Throw it out to members. Any comments, please? Any questions for the Deputy Monitoring Officer? Councillor Canavan.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the report. I was just curious. I'll unplug that and you won't get any feedback. Sorry. I'm just curious, the tables in the report are for BCP. Do you produce a similar report for the town councils for whom we operate this service on their behalf?
We actually don't provide that breakdown of data to the parish and town councils. Really, the numbers are so low, they probably won't be very meaningful because they will fluctuate from year to year. So you've got to have a fair amount of data to actually provide some analysis.
Can I just, oh, sorry, is that my number? Can I just add to that? As it was stated in the minutes, we have suggested that when we know the outcomes of the Community Governance Review, the Standards Committee may need an additional meeting. One of those factors to discuss is the pressure of work that may be placed upon the Standards Committee, because we would have a bigger scale to manage as potentially over and above the current town and parish councils. And that might be one thing that the Standards Committee commits to do going forward, which is how do we keep more informed our town and parish councils, and perhaps liaising with clerks going forward about what they would like to receive on an annual basis. So, Chair, I'm just saying that when we know the outcomes, that may be something that we want to just pick up in a future work programme discussion. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, very happy to do that. I think that there could be quite a considerable increase in our work, dependent on the Community Governance Review. Any other questions? Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's nice to be back on the standards board. I've not sat on one for about 4 years, something like that. And it's interesting how very little seems to have changed in the fact that social media is the main source of complaints. But just looking at these tables here and comparing the number of complaints and what they were for year on year, 22-23 was obviously massively high with 57 complaints. Then 23-24 dropped to 6. And then it's gone back up to 23. So as I've not been involved, what's happened, or what happened in 23-24 to reduce the number of complaints? Is that when the social media training took place and people remembered it? Is it the fact that no one did anything a bit silly? Or is it the fact that one particular issue or two particular issues have resulted in 5 or 6 of the same complaints, which are then double or triple counted or so on?
I think the main driver was that we were all elected in 23 and attended extensive training, and were all very minded to watch our P's and Q's and what we were up to. As Richard said, it does seem to be cyclical. We start off with everybody behaving, and then as it goes through the term, it seems to get higher and higher in the number of complaints. You might remember that prior to the elections, I mean, I think we had something like, is it on there, the total number of complaints? It was ridiculously high, and we seem to be meeting every 2 weeks for our consultation meetings to deal with the number of complaints. So I think that's probably the main driver. But Richard, if you've got anything to come in on that, please.
I think probably the only other observation is we had a significantly large cohort of new councillors in the election year, so in 23-24.
And yes, they were all behaving, which was lovely. Anybody else have anything to add to this at this point? No, well, the recommendation as set out, let's just go back to that page there, is that the annual report on the Code of Conduct complaints be reviewed and any further work be identified for inclusion in the work programme. As Deputy Monitoring Officer said, in the report there is a suggestion that this should go to full council. I'm happy to propose that if I have a seconder for that. Are members in support of that? Yeah, Councillor Chapman will second it, and Councillor Canavan as well. So can we have a vote on that, please? Is there any dissent? No? Okay. Yeah, I think it's important that all members see this. So if we could have this going to council at some point in the future, that would be lovely. Thank you. Great, thank you very much. And we also note the report. So thank you very much. Moving on. Oh, Mr. Cashmore, I see that you're with us. Before we move on to that, is there anything that you wish to say on the report? And welcome to the committee. Nice to have you with us.
I apologise for being late. No, I have no comments at this time. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Mr. Cashmore. Item 9. No, item 10. Apologies. No, item 9. The Code of Conduct Complaints Review. This is providing members with an update on the complaints regarding alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct against councillors received or concluded since the last committee met in April 2025. And I'm going to ask the Deputy Monitoring Officer to present that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Very short introduction, to be fair. You've stolen half of my words already, actually, with the executive summary. This is the standing item that you now have before the committee. It provides you with an update of the complaints and the progress of complaints. Those that were previously closed at the last meeting or reported as closed do not appear on this report. They've been removed. So these are those that have been closed since that report in April, and any new complaints received and potentially determined. The table at paragraph 7 provides the detail of those reports and the current progress. And Mr. McKinstry is absolutely correct. Column 3 should indicate that the complaint BCP 209 was fully upheld, as outlined in column 2 of that same table. As I said, the table summarises the details. The recommendation is that the outcome of complaints concluded and the progress of those still outstanding be noted. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have been busy, as you can see. Any comments or questions from members on this particular report, please? Yes, Councillor Patterson West.
It was just to see if we've got any progress on the ones that do remain kind of pending. I can't remember what the dates of them were, but I know they're pretty close to now, if we've had any feedback or anything similar, so that they are being imminently closing, I guess.
Deputy Monitoring Officer, please.
Those complaints so councillors are given, I think in answer to the question or the statement actually, so councillors by default are afforded 14 days to respond, whether that's at the initial stage of new complaints or at that later stage. We give an initial period of 14 days, but that period may be extended for, could be personal reasons, holiday, absences and so on. So really the detail of individual complaints wouldn't be discussed in public forum. That would be dealt with under closed session.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on this report or any questions of the Deputy Monitoring Officer, please? Mr. Cashmore, is there any comment that you wish to make on this report, please?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The recommendation is that the outcome of concluded complaints and progress of those still outstanding be noted. Can I have a proposer and seconder for that? Anyone? Thank you. Councillor Wright, Councillor Rigby. Any dissent? No? Excellent. So that's carried. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item number 10 now, which is the review of the Code of Conduct's complaints procedure. We are asked to commence a review for the procedure of the handling of complaints under the Code of Conduct, and I'd like to invite the Monitoring Officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as we discussed at our last meeting, and the notes are in the minutes, you asked for an item this evening on a review of the Code of Conduct complaints procedure, or the complaints handling procedure, whichever phraseology you wish to use. We have provided a report which at the Appendix 1 sets out our current procedures, and during the body of the report at paragraph 5, I've included examples of other councils' complaints procedures by way of kind of stark contrast, if I may. The government has consulted widely on the standards framework, and this committee participated fully in that consultation exercise earlier this year. And part of that was an indication that there may be an option of a standard complaints procedure being issued at some point in time. However, that is not the current position at this moment in time, and therefore we are promoted to have local procedures. So this is why there is a stark difference in the procedures which are promoted by various councils. So paragraph 5, I just want to highlight that I've included an extreme example, which is Cornwall Council has one of the most number of parish and town councils currently in the country by virtue of reorganisation, and they name every single subject councillor and regardless of whether a complaint has been upheld or not. You'll see on the website that I've included, they provide decision notices onto progress. And having spoken to my colleagues at Cornwall, they admit that the vast majority of the complaints there arise from parish and town councils due to the sheer volume of local councils that they have. However, I wanted to provide like a halfway house contrast. The second link that I've provided goes to Dorset Council. Dorset Council have a hybrid approach that their subject councillor is named via a decision notice if the complaint is upheld, but also that complaint is then referred to council as well. So there are different mechanisms, and I felt it was useful to include the links to both so that members here would feel slightly more informed of different procedures. At Appendix 1, you will note in our procedure, I think my personal view is that as the monitoring officer, this is probably overdue a fitness for purpose test. Is it still functioning as and when we require it? The volume of complaints that we've heard about earlier in this meeting show that it's subject to very heavy usage. Does it meet the transparency requirements that members of the public expect, the wider councillor community now expects? Does it meet the needs of our town and parish councils, for example, so that it's easily understood? Is it in sufficient plain English, etc.? So that is what I mean by a fitness for purpose test. I've put in the recommendations of the report, Chair, that you may wish to consider commissioning a review of the complaints procedure. That could be either via a working party of this committee or the committee in an entirety meeting and discussing. But I've tried to leave it as open as possible. I've not, however, put an alternative recommendation in that the committee may wish to await the outcomes from MHCLG, from central government, about whether there is any sort of standard complaints handling process coming into force anytime soon. I'm on the MHCLG Monitoring Officers Consultation Group. We do heavily discuss this. They have not provided me with any timeframes, Chair, as to when we may expect some outcomes and next steps. I'm happy to answer any questions around the procedure, around options. Likewise, I'm happy to go away and, by way of homework, Chair, source alternative procedures that are operated with other councils. But I'm quite at the committee's mercy, really, of how you want to progress this.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. I'm obviously aware of the review that's going on and know that you've been involved in that. I wouldn't want us to do the work twice, because we could find that we do our own review and then we get guidelines or instructions from MHCLG, and we could end up doing the same work twice. But in the interim, I think it's very important for us to have greater transparency in this procedure. And if there was just a very small tweaking that we could make, that we publicly name those councillors who are upheld as having breached the code of conduct, that might be a halfway house that we could do until MHCLG come back to us and tell us exactly what they're doing. And I'd like members to have a think about that, please, and see if that would gather support from members, and maybe whether we ask the leaders as well. I know we have leaders here, as to whether that would sit well with them, because as has been pointed out by our member of the public, it may well be that deterrent, and it may well also encourage those members who have declined to apologise or accept the sanctions. It may well actually encourage them to do so. I'd like to hand this over to the committee to consider, please. And if you have any complaints for the monitoring officer. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I would be in favour of naming councillors where complaints have been upheld, but not the Cornwall model where you name, innocent until proven guilty sort of thing. I would not be in favour of just naming everybody.
Councillor Chapman.
Maybe the monitoring officer can help me on this. So how long has this conversation with MHCLG been going on for? Because obviously these conversations can go on for some time. I would be nervous about saying, oh, let's not do anything, because we don't want to do the work twice, which is fair enough. Completely get that. If nothing happens for 5 years, which, is plausible, could happen. We all know that standards isn't exactly very high up the agenda in general for a lot of people. So I think if we can come up with some minor tweaks somehow, either as a group, either as a committee or as a smaller working party, to sort of tweaks to just sort of, really kind of just raise the bar a little bit, that would be greatly appreciated.
Chair, if I may. As this committee is aware, MHCLG launched their consultation on the standards framework, and that is not just the code of conduct, but the supporting arrangements around it in December. The consultation concluded in February from knowledge. I am aware from my networks that certain national stakeholders, such as the Office of the Ombudsman, for example, have given their views about whether they would be comfortable in being a kind of a national body to convene or oversee a national complaints framework. But again, there is no information coming from MHCLG. It is discussion amongst my network of monitoring officers and the governance network, but MHCLG have just said, thank you for your responses and we'll be with you as soon as. So there will, however, the changes may require changes to primary legislation, and that could be the delay factor, or there are some regulations that come in to support a halfway house or some of the changes. The code that we currently have at the moment is a model code. Not every local authority is not required to sign up to the model code, and there are minority councils now that still have their own local code, but that has gained a lot of traction. So again, it may be that the LGA put some pressure on MHCLG, may come up with a handling procedure that is acceptable across all councils, and all councils, like they did with the code, feel it preferable to adopt it. So I'm not quite sure yet what will happen, but I can't give timeframes. I just know that MHCLG has thanked everybody, and my network are giving their views back.
Thank you, monitoring officer. The issue of the Ombudsman stepping in, that's very interesting. That almost sort of harks back to the Standards Board of England, doesn't it? Before 2011. Does anybody else have, Councillor Patterson-West?
Yeah, just to say I'm certainly in favour of, like Councillor Wright, naming people where the complaint has been upheld. I think a massive frustration of this group has been that we can't, like the sanctions especially, are often not complied with, and I think it shouldn't necessarily take it getting all the way to sanctions for somebody to be named. And I think, that's something that's potentially a very small tweak, shouldn't take a huge amount of work, and hopefully can have some level of impact. And also within that, if we're naming people and we're suggesting within that context what the sanction is, then in some way it should enable that person to make whatever it might be, whether it be a personal apology or an apology to council. It might just just takes some of the power away from them having to stand up out of almost nowhere and make an apology. It might lead into that and kind of break the ice slightly. So I'm certainly in favour of it where things have been upheld.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd agree. I think making some small tweaks now is a good thing to be able to do to try and make this a little bit stronger and try and change just a few little bits, because when we don't know what the time frame is going to be like to deliver anything at the minute, we're dealing with, what, 76 councillors. If CGR goes through, we could end up with another, I don't know how many councillors, you know, 100, 150, whatever it might end up being, loads more. And like you said earlier, the workload of this committee, the Democratic Services, the monitoring officer, could increase significantly. So if there's a way to tweak this to reduce the risk of elected members breaking the code of conduct because they feel like something's going to happen, then it's probably a good thing to do. I mean, even just scanning through the Cornwall one, which names people at the end, I think that goes too far. But they had one bit in it that I did like, and it's something I've always had a bit of a thing about in our code of conduct, is that the complaint doesn't relate to the behaviour in a member's official capacity as a councillor. And what does that mean? And I remember sitting in the informal meeting, sometimes going backwards and forwards for half an hour, 45 minutes at a time, deciding whether or not it was in someone's capacity as a councillor. And they've got just again, it's a little tiny tweak, which says, I'll read it exactly what it is so I can actually do it. Relate to a member's behaviour whilst they are acting or giving the impression that they are acting in their official capacity, which is very slightly different, but could have a bigger implication, particularly on social media, where people are like, well, it's my personal Facebook account. And you're like, well, all you do is argue about politics on it. Is that not technically what you're doing? So little things like that, a few changes of words, I think could have a really big impact.
Thank you. That's very valuable. Anybody else got anything to contribute at this point in time? Well, the recommendation is that the committee undertakes a review of the complaints handling procedure, and there's obviously an appetite for that. I wouldn't want to exclude anybody from being able to partake in that by setting up a task and finish group. I'm quite happy to have the committee, we are only a small committee, to have all the committee involved in that if they want to be, but there's no necessity for you to be, but it could be an open invitation for those who want to partake in that. Monitoring officer, can I ask, if we do this review, we bring it back to our next standards committee and it's approved, is the process then, would it have to go to the Constitution Working Party or just go straight to council?
No, Chair, it goes straight to council. So the Standards Committee has the right to refer matters directly to council.
Excellent. So in that case, then we could be looking at a nice quick fix for this, which would give us something to work with whilst we wait for MHCLG to make their decisions, and obviously if there's going to be any changes to legislation as well. So the committee undertakes review of the complaints handling procedure, and the committee will report on the outcome of its review at a future meeting. I'm very happy to propose from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr. Cashmore, are you happy with that decision?
I'm very supportive of more publicity and for scrutiny of the sanctions as well. I'm very happy about that.
Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 11, councillor training update. The report provides an overview of the training deemed to be essential for all councillors to complete, in addition to the code of conduct training that all councillors have completed as part of the induction programme. I'd now like to ask the Deputy Monitoring Officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first time you've received a report on training. And again, it was part of your forward plan asking for a report to come back in due course. So the report does provide that overview of the what we're classifying as essential training for councillors, and the update at this point. The report includes an appendix that's anonymised for each councillor, which will form the basis of our monitoring going forward. Mandatory training, although the report refers to mandatory training, it's actually mandatory training for all employees. It forms part of our performance development framework as part of our annual reviews. But it is considered that these training modules are essential for councillors. Some of those flow directly from council policies, such as our safeguarding strategy, whilst other elements are to protect the interests of the council and to mitigate key risks. There have been some high-profile incidents relating to some of the subject areas, including child protection, data breaches and cyber attacks in other organisations, both public and private, which have had significant impacts on the ability of the organisation to operate. There's a couple of recent cyber attacks on commercial businesses that have brought those organisations' online activities almost to a halt. So the training is delivered through two platforms. They're called Skillgate and Meta Compliance. These are listed in paragraph 6 to 8. I'm not going to read through that list. The overall completion rates are detailed in section 12 of the report. They were, as at the time of publication of this agenda, which was the 30th of June. It should be noted that the Meta Compliance data is only updated on the 1st of each month. So that was as at the 1st of June. Just to illustrate the changes that have taken place over that last month, though, I've done a calculation of the July data, and for each of the modules on the Meta Compliance, they've increased from between 4% and there's only one around 4%, most are around 10%, with the highest being a 16% increase across those Meta Compliance modules in July. The recommendations are set out in the report, but they are to note the training update as a baseline for future annual reporting, that all councillors be sent a quarterly update of their individual performance, political group leaders also be sent a quarterly update on the progress of their members' performance with a request to encourage uptake, and that the training modules deemed as mandatory for employees be designated as mandatory for councillors. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Monitoring Officer. One from me to start off with. The updated data that you have, I'm noticing that there are a number of councillors who have not done any Meta Compliance whatsoever. Can you give me a percentage of the number of councillors that we have that have not done, that are still on 0% compliance?
Again, just to clarify, as of the 1st of July,
Yes.
It was 18 councillors of the 76, which is 23.7%. Just to compare that,
nearly a
Skillgate,
quarter of the council have not undertaken any Meta Compliance training. That's
correct. Just again, just for completeness, the Skillgate is 6 out of the 76 have not completed any of the Skillgate modules, which is 7.9%.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Councillor Farquhar to come to the table because I understand he has a question on this as well. While Councillor Farquhar takes his place, Councillor Patterson-West, can I come to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if there's a possibility we could maybe link this, and obviously it'll be something that needs to be discussed when we do look at the processes and procedures. But I think there potentially is some value there, especially if we look at people who have got multiple breaches of social media. And perhaps one of the sanctions has been to comply and complete social media training, for example. Is there a way that we could link the subject councillors' completion of training to any outcomes of complaints? And or my other thought being is that as members of the Standards Committee, could we have something in there that meant that we needed to be up to date in some way to be able to be passing judgment on others from this committee? Because I think that only seems reasonable that we do obtain the highest standards of people in our position.
I think that's a very good point, but I'll go to the monitoring officer to see if we can mandate that, and also to answer Councillor Patterson-West's first question.
Chair, it's not mandatory yet, but I am an absolute promoter of the Standards Committee upholding the best levels of ethical governance across the council, because this committee is the custodian of the ethical governance framework, which is the code of conduct, it is the officer member protocol, it is all of the protocols in part 6 of the Constitution as well, which have an impact on how behaviour and how the public perceive a councillor when acting as a councillor. So I think it would be for this committee to make a decision as to whether you believe that that is a requirement of membership of this committee. I don't think as the monitoring officer I can dictate that. But the Standards Committee, I see no reason why you can't express a view as a committee, and it may impact on your peers as well, Chair.
Thank you. What do members think about that? Councillor Nanovo.
My concern, looking at the meta compliance and this cyber police season 1, 2, is that it's leaving, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not very technical, but isn't it leaving BCP open to risk? If people don't know the risks, they're more likely to click on something that they shouldn't, and it's a higher security risk. So maybe there should be some sort of system where you have to do it. You can't proceed until you've completed it. You know, you get, I don't know, 24 hours, 48 hours or something to complete each module before you can continue with the use of your laptop. Just a thought.
Thank you. That's that's quite harsh, but you are right about the meta compliance and how important it is. I actually heard an anecdote today that a former councillor had actually scratched their password into the laptop and didn't see anything wrong with that, and was picked up by IT when he brought his laptop in. So yes, it is important. Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that, and in fact, I mean, I'd go one further with this, and I think anything which is mandatory, I've said it in the past, and I think there may have been reasons why I couldn't. That this should be published online. Our residents should be able to see what training their councillors have undertaken, and in the same way that our attendance at meetings is available for people to go and have a look at and see what it is, why isn't the mandatory training? For example, you know, if I'm holding a surgery which is open to anyone in a public space, yet I've not done safeguarding training, why should residents feel comfortable coming to me? So I think it should be available for residents to be able to see what we're doing. It shouldn't be anonymised, and anything which is mandatory should be done, and we should be held accountable by the public who put us in the chairs that we sit in.
I need to go to Councillor Canavan, Councillor Chapman, and then Councillor Wright. Councillor Canavan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just seeking clarification, really. I'm just troubled by this word deemed as mandatory. And there seems to be a question mark about whether it is mandatory or not. Are we in a position as a committee or as council to make it mandatory? It just strikes me that it kind of is, but it isn't. If that's not a daft thing to say. So if it were possible to make that element of it being mandatory stronger, I think that would help. I also absolutely agree with Councillor Rigby's point about this being public information. I don't know if anybody else has been to the Operation Ford briefings that have been had by the police, but I don't think it could be any more stark as the need for us to be careful about our cyber vulnerability and the need for us to be aware of that. So I think it's a useful reminder to us all, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
The numbers are quite scary. I count myself as being pretty technically minded. I'm pretty aware of you know, with the phishing and that, you know, general IT stuff in, you know, and I found the cyber police stuff to be very, very useful. There were some scenarios which I hadn't thought of, and especially for the less technically minded people, councillors in the thing on the council, you know, especially things like the QR codes and clicking stuff on emails that you shouldn't click on, and just, if you haven't grown up with this technology, then you are much less likely to be aware of this stuff. So yeah, I personally would be very supportive of making this list public, with naming the counters, because it's really important, and it could cost the council a lot of money if data went walkabout that shouldn't be in the public realm, because the council hadn't had enough training or hadn't done the training.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
I was reminded recently why we should be cautious about naming people who haven't done cyber training, because that automatically opens them up to cyber attacks. So yeah, I think we should be cautious about naming people who haven't done certain courses. That didn't come from me, it came from a very, very experienced monitoring officer.
Thank you. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations on your third term leading standards. I come here today as to put my hands up that I'm responsible for some of these percentages that you see here, or should I say the downward tick on those. I've had a struggle with a variety of the skill gate and the meta compliance. Predominantly, as I can see, or you can all see, that the skill gate is far higher in the 80 percentiles, high 80 percentiles for completion of those, whereas the meta compliance, depending on the particular course, drops down to high 50 percentiles. That reflects my own particular experience as a councillor. As a councillor, I've come to the role, and as all elected members here, we take a declaration on election that we will uphold and fulfil the duties as an elected member to the best of our judgment and ability. Now, unfortunately, the best of my judgment and ability is affected by the fact that I am neurodiverse, or to be actually accurate, I am neurodivergent. So I've struggled with ADHD, recently diagnosed, since infancy. One of the things which I have a problem with is where you have compliance in one means only of being compliant. All the way through my 6 years, I have taken that declaration to the best of my judgment and ability more than once by being re-elected, and for a variety of roles which I've fulfilled within the council, including being vice chair of the council and recently mayor. The key here is that, particularly when it's mandatory, is that as councillors, we're not employees of the council. I don't want to be confrontational about it because I do see the value of this training. However, as we can see from the figures, the nature of the training being different between meta compliance and the skill gate is such that there's a higher update with a certain way that it's actually trained, or a certain way that's presented in bite-sized chunks. Now, I actually prefer bite-sized chunks because the nature of my condition, and I've not just got ADHD, I've got a variety of other letters since we're being open for the public, which includes CPTSD, MDD, APD, and a variety of other letters after my name, none of which are professional qualifications. They're just simply the nature of who I am and who I was born as with my neurodivergence. The problem which I wanted to bring was that, yes, we can be scared by the figures and the lack of compliance, etc. But we have to, particularly when we're looking at diversity and inclusion, not only amongst our residents that we are elected to serve, but also within our employment and the role which we fulfill. And so one of the things which I wanted to highlight to the committee is that as a neurodivergent person, I find it extremely difficult, nay, sometimes impossible, to actually do self-driven digital training. And I found that throughout my life before digital training was a thing. So I would ask the committee to consider what steps can be done to be compassionate to those amongst the 76 councillors that we have here, in the same way that I'm sure that the local authority shows compassion to those that are diverse in their abilities within the workflows, which is mandatory to carry out this training. For being named, I've nothing to hide. I'm quite happy to be named. I'm quite happy to share should somebody ask my particular conditions. But what remains all the way through is that I serve to the best of my understanding and my ability, and I take those duties upon myself. So that's what I wanted to share with the committee today, is just perhaps explore ways that we can get these figures up by understanding that many of our councillors here, our elected members, our fellows on the benches in the chamber, actually have a different need for the way that we absorb and we train and we complete mandatory stuff like this, but also to highlight that it is not mandatory for council members. But I also would like to thank Richard Jones in his capacity as the head of Democratic Services for taking the time out to introduce me to perhaps different ways that I could actually approach this training for members, and suggest some things which might actually help me and other diverse members that we have. And hopefully with the feedback to the training and the advancement within the local authority, then perhaps we can share what I anticipate other employees of the council actually benefit from for completing these figures and getting them up. So thank you very much for allowing me to address the committee today. But sometimes it's long before there's more to be seen to just the numbers on a piece of paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I appreciate your candour and your disclosure in bringing this very important point to our attention, and something that we may well have overlooked. I'm sure that this council is compliant with the Equalities Act 2015, and I'd like to ask the Deputy Monitoring Officer what is put in place for people who are struggling with this type of training, and if there is perhaps a buddy system or some other forms of training that members who do struggle can do without obviously having to put themselves in an embarrassing situation where they feel that they have to come to committee to make that point. We're very grateful to Councillor Farquhar for doing so, because it has highlighted this. And we must comply with our Equalities Act. So could you please outline what is in place to assist members with this? Thank you. And also for members of staff as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In paragraph 21 of the report, we do highlight the need to be aware of individual councillors who may have additional support needs and to put reasonable adjustments in place on an individual basis. So I think I'm grateful to Councillor Farquhar for his time again actually in raising this issue with us. What we don't know, to be fair, are the needs of individual councillors. So whilst I think it may be a longer term, maybe a medium term ambition of the committee to maybe disclose some of this information, although as Councillor Wright said, there are some real risks with that in terms of opening the council up to risks. I think we probably need to engage with those members who are not yet engaged with this process, maybe through and support from the political group leaders, to actually have that conversation and see what else we can do, whether it's on a buddy system, whether it's a group session. Certainly as an employer, and for employees, and councillors are not our employees in that sense, but certainly for employees, as a manager, you would work with an individual who may have additional requirements to put those measures in place and support them, whatever that condition might be. And clearly we do have mechanisms as well. Not everyone is IT based who works for the council. So we have mechanisms in place to get those individuals trained as well.
So if you're holding in-person training for officers for some of the mandatory training, could that be extended to those members who have yet to complete those particular elements of the courses?
My understanding is that training that is delivered for individuals, for instance, who don't have devices is by service area. So it's not a corporate facility, but I can certainly take this back. Again, Councillor Farquhar was kind enough to talk me through some of the issues, and he's going to feed back to me some of those issues, and I will go back to the development team, training and development team, to discuss some of those issues and maybe put in place some other arrangements that might be suitable for councillors working in a buddy system or a group session, going through the mandatory training.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, George. Greatly appreciated for you to come here today. And you know, I have worked with some neurodivergent people in my time, and their needs can be very, very different to you know, and even myself. I am not neurodivergent, but I wasn't academic at school. I really struggled. I am much more hands-on and much more practical, and the old way of teaching in those days just didn't work for me. So I'm not going to say I understand, but I have an inkling. My other point on want to just cover a little bit of is the not naming and shaming. That would be called security through obscurity. And whilst it can work to an extent, it's like leaving the window open on the back of your house. So yes, okay, from the road you can't see that window is open. It only takes you to wander around the back through a gate, climb a gate, to know that window is open and to climb into that window. So I really don't think we should be relying on security through obscurity. The not naming them shouldn't be the option. The option should be to get their training up to date, and we should be naming and shaming, because that might be the only way of actually getting them to do the training to close that window. Thank you.
Can I come to our independent person for their comments and questions, please?
Yeah, this is Paul Cashmore. The analogy that springs to mind here is that you wouldn't lend the council minibus to somebody who hadn't got a driving licence. Yeah. I know it's a bit trite, but people need to do this training. However it's delivered and on what timescale it's delivered, the sooner the better. Yeah, it needs to be delivered. It needs to be understood so that the council is not put at risk.
Thank you, Mr. Cashmore. I think we've had a very good debate on this tonight, and it's raised some very important points. We have recommendations as set out for us. My eyesight's getting appalling. That the training completion records be noted as a baseline for future annual reporting. All councillors be sent a quarterly update on their individual performance. Political group leaders be sent a quarterly report on their progress of their members' performance for the request to encourage uptake. And that the training modules deemed as mandatory for employees be designated as mandatory for councillors. We've also had a proposal that I heard going around, or a suggestion that members of the Standards Committee be required to have 100% mandatory training record in order to be the bastions of this. I'm happy to add that as E. If there is support for that, I'm happy to propose.
Yeah.
Councillor Chapman will second. Can I have a show of hands for that, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. I think we've debated that, haven't we? Right, so we now move on to agenda item 12, which is the work plan. And I'd like to ask the monitoring officer for any updates to the published forward plan, please.
Chair, I think we've got quite a comprehensive list. We need to change the date for the review of Code of Conduct Complaints procedure, because I think the committee indicated they may like to see that back at the next meeting in October. Mm-hmm. I'm not aware of anything else that needs to be added to this, unless you want to sort of really forward plan and build in the next annual report going through, because that will be considered just into 2026, which it covers this work plan. But I'm open to suggestions for additions that any members may have Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've got quite a comprehensive work plan there. I think it's important to have a committee meeting, perhaps as a consultation meeting, to consider the code of conduct review of the procedure, so that we can get this back to our committee meeting in October. Councillor Chapman, you wish to say something on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly that. That we need to. I would suggest linking it up with one of the informals that we have to with the committee together to look at some minor tweakings that we can just sort of raise the bar a little bit.
Thank you. Yes, I think actually we should have it as a separate meeting rather than as part of a consultation meeting where we consider complaints, because they take quite some time anyway. And I think the review could possibly take a bit of time. And I would like to extend that review meeting to all members of the committee as well, rather than just a handful of councillors as a working party. Monitoring officer, any further thoughts on that?
I'm chair, sorry, quite happy for it to be a separate meeting. I think the consultation meetings that we have potential to be quite lengthy, and I don't want anybody's ability to fully debate the issues being curtailed because we have a secondary agenda item, if that makes sense.
Councillor Chapman.
And the independent persons.
Absolutely, and the independent persons, of course. Mr. Cashmore, any thoughts on the work programme?
No, I'm content with it as it is. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. I'm having a senior moment, but I've just realised what I should have also said. We're halfway through this administration, and I was wondering, as the monitoring officer, whether this committee would value a refresher on the code of conduct training. I appreciate that you live, eat and breathe it, and you had it as part of the induction. However, it does set an example. There is no harm in just going through the model code that we have and just having a refresher exercise. We do have a new member as well of the committee. And substitutes as well. Councillor Rigby, Councillor Canavan may feel that might be prudent at some point, so we can build that into the work programme if you so wish, Chair.
I'm very happy to do that, and I think we should extend the invitation to any member that wishes to attend. Councillor Rigby. Thank you. Yeah, so if we could, I'm happy to propose that. Seconder, please. Councillor Chapman Law. All those in favour? Yeah, unanimous. Thank you very much. I think that now concludes tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank our members for attending, especially our substitute members, our new member of the committee. Thank you once again for your support in me as your chair. Thank you to our members of the public and, of course, our visiting councillors, and also, of course, to our independent person and our officers and our member of the press. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, everybody, and good night.